Hi, I'm Beth from So Country, and today's tutorial is for the Mika Essential Oils or Toiletry bag, and this is from Unikatz Patterns. As you know by now, I love sewing pouches, and I definitely love sewing pouches that I can use for different things and patterns that come together quickly and simply. Now, I personally do not use essential oils, but I still love this pattern. I'm going to sew this bag exactly the way the pattern says to sew it, including the little containers for the essential oil bottles. The reason why I'm going to sew it this way, even though I don't use essential oils, is because I'm gifting this to my daughter for nail polish bottles. She can slide them in the little holders, and this can be just a cute way to store her nail polish on her counter in her bedroom or bathroom. So I'm making another version exactly like this. However, if you do not like the holders in this, you can just leave that out, and this is still a super cute pouch for toiletries or for kids to put their little toys in for car rides and things like that. It's just a great size and shape, and it comes together really quick. So let's talk about what we need to sew up this pouch. The first thing we're going to look at is the front and the back of the pouch. I'm using vinyl for mine, so I have a front and a back. Then I have the interior, which I'm using a waterproof or water-resistant canvas. Then I'm going to have my bottom gusset piece. I'll have one in the lining, one in the vinyl, and then my zipper gusset pieces. For my zipper gusset, I'm going to be using 2 for the vinyl and 2 in this water-resistant canvas. Also, I will need a zipper. I don't measure the zipper, I just make sure that it's longer than my zipper panel. Of course, I will need one zipper pull. Since I am making the holders in my bag, I'm going to use fold-over elastic. I don't have any traditional elastic on hand. I'm not going to the store to buy anything, so I'm just using what I have. So this is what I'm using. And then also, we do have to bind this bag, and so I have some binding. Just so you know, something I do is I always, if I have just a little bit of fabric left, I always just use it and cut strips of binding with it, and then I store it in a drawer. When it's time to make something that uses binding, I just grab out a handful of whatever color I have that looks somewhat decent with it. So never throw away scraps, just cut them into binding. So this is what we need to sew this bag. I'm going to tell you that the pattern does have a separate pattern piece that looks like this for interfacing, stabilizer, things like that. I am not using any of it. The reason why is because my vinyl is pretty thick, so I don't need to use any SF101 or Decaville Light. The fleece that is called for in this pattern is kind of for stability. If you are using this for essential oils or nail polish, anything glass bottles, and you're carrying it and transporting around, it's going to be for travel, you definitely want to add the fleece for protection. It is adding like padding so that the glass bottles don't get damaged or broken and things like that. Since this will just be sitting on my daughter's shelf, I don't need to do that, and so I'm opting not to. If I was using a cotton woven, I would definitely add SF101, Decaville Light, and the fleece, kept out of my seam allowance, to make sure that it had the right structure and it could hold its shape nicely. But since I did this one already in vinyl with a waterproof canvas the same way I'm doing this pattern, I know I don't have to worry about it. I know I'll still get the shape I want and the structure. So that is how I'm doing mine. So the first thing I'm going to do is the same thing I always do with bags like this. I always make my zipper gusset first. So when working with our gusset, I'm not going to attach my pull just yet, and I'm going to use the 4 zipper gusset pieces, my zipper tape, and some clips. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to lay my waterproof canvas, or water resistant canvas, whatever it is, I always get confused. I'm going to lay it right sides up. I'm going to lay my zipper tape on it right sides up, and I am just going to baste along that raw edge. This step can be avoided if you want to. You could go ahead and put your vinyl right on top and make the sandwich and do it. I just do it this way. It's easier for me. So I'm going to base that in place with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now my vinyl is directional, and the way I've decided I want it is that whenever I look at the bag, just like with this one, I want to be able to, it to be going this way. Okay, I know I'm not explaining it right. So I want my zipper gusset to end up like this on both sides. So if I'm looking at this side, it's accurate. If I look over on this side, the other side will be accurate. So that means my directions need to go opposite each other, and so I'm going to orientate mine that way. So since I know if I'm looking at it, I want it to be like this, I'm going to flip it up that way. I'm going to match up my edges. So for this part, I will pull out a clip and just put a clip there in place on that side. And on the top here, I don't clip all the way around because I can orientate it as I sew, but I'm going to do it this way whenever I start. Now at this point, I'm going to sew with the full seam allowance given in the pattern to attach this vinyl to my zipper tape. Now that I got that attached, I am just going to fold these wrong sides together. I do like to clip the edges together because they tend to want to roll, and I want the lining and the exterior to remain the same length. So whenever I'm sewing and top stitching, they have a tendency to want to kind of fold in, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just clipping along these bottoms here, and then I will top stitch that edge we just sewn 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to go ahead and top stitch 1/8 inch away along that edge, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and baste around the other 3 sides just to hold everything in place for when I'm attaching it later. I have that ready. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other side. Now that I have the zipper panel ready, I'm going to go ahead and attach my zipper pull. And I'm just going to put it halfway in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and trim up this zipper tape, and then I'll attach my bottom gusset. So first thing I'll do is I will pull out the bottom gusset. So since my zipper is closing to the left, that's going to be what's considered the front of my bag. So I want it to go, I want my direction to be going down like that. So I'm just going to flip my vinyl in the orientation I want it, and I'm going to line up the raw edges here at the short side. They will be right sides together. Just put a few clips right there in place. Since this is such a short distance, I'm not too worried about things shifting, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out my water resistant canvas, and I'm going to take it and place it right sides together with the lining. I'm going to clip that there, and I'm going to sew this now with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. Pull these back, have them wrong sides together. Again, I'll put a clip or two at the end because these will try to roll in and be uneven, and I do not want that. So just clip the edges. And then when I'm sewing, I'm still pulling to make sure I hold it straight. And I'm just going to top stitch on the bottom gusset side to close this up and make it lay flat. So 1/8 of an inch away from that seam you just sewed. Top stitching is done there. Now I'm going to repeat this on the other side. So I'll take my bottom exterior, Place it right sides together with the zipper panel exterior. Put some clips in there. Now I need to get my waterproof or water resistant canvas over. So I'm just going to fold it up a little bit so I can get a better clearance, so it can reach over there easier. Make that sandwich again and once more, so with the full seam allowance from that raw edge. Pull it out so you can open it up, turn everything right sides out. And now not only do I want to top stitch here, but I want to baste all along these sides so everything's encased and enclosed, so whenever I'm attaching it later, it's easier to attach. So I'm going to place a couple of clips on each side, and I'm going to start right down here, so up, over, and down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to find my quarter marks. So first thing I'll do is I'll match these seams, and I'll make a mark within my seam allowance on both sides of this top, both sides of this bottom. After I make those marks, then I'm going to push those marks together and mark again here at the top and here at the bottom. That will give me my quarter marks, and then your pattern piece for your front and your back has the quarter markings already on it, so you can use that to once again mark quarter markings on these pieces. So let's get our marks made, and then we will do our next steps. Now that we made our corner markings on the exterior and the zipper panel, it's time to work on the lining. So the lining is super unique because it has the loops for the essential oils bottles. If you do not want to do them, you don't have to. You would just skip this section and pick it back up after I'm done. So I have my two lining panels out, and I have my fold over elastic. I've already made the marks on both the panels and the fold over elastic. I don't want to give away too much information because the pattern, I don't want people to not use the pattern. So I'm going to go over some of how you do it, but I won't give the specific information. So the first thing is that there is markings for small loops and markings for large loops. The pattern has a specific piece. That piece fits on this bottom curve, and it has the marks already put on that pattern piece. So all you do is transfer them over. She does tell something that's really cool, and I'm going to point it out. She tells you to make an upside down T. That way, not only do you have a part where you can place the bottom of your fold over elastic, but you also have the stitch line there too. So you can line up that stitch line with that line and also the bottom edge. So that is a great way to keep everything straight and even and uniform. So really good idea to do the upside down T's. So for these markings, the elastic has to be cut a certain way to make the loops the right size. I am going to show you how to do that. She gives this super awesome piece. I think it's really cool. The first thing she tells us is that with your fold over elastic, you measure in a certain amount. So I'm not going to tell you that amount, but it's in the pattern. And you make a mark there. After you make that mark, the large loops, you put that first mark you made at the top, and then you just let it lay down. You're not pulling or anything like that, and you make a second loop, a second mark right there at the bottom. Then you pull up your fold over elastic to where that line is at the top, and then you make another line. Then you fold up that mark and do it again. You keep doing it until you have the marks or the lines that she tells you for both the big and the small. If you're doing the small, you're going to do the same thing. Make that first initial line, and that's where you place it at the top. And then you start making your lines the same way. You will have more lines you make, of course, for your small, because the loops will be smaller. So make your line, pull that up to the top. Make your line, pull that up to the top. This right here is really neat because you can use that format for any pattern you want to use it for. Also, I thought that you could make, like if you're doing the small, after you sew it down, you could even sew in between those lines to make them smaller for things like crayons for kids. She posted a picture of her own where her kids were using the larger loops for even their toy cars to fit them in there. So this pattern is not just for essential oils. It has lots of different purposes, so keep that in mind. So now let's go ahead and start sewing. Let's start with the large first. So I have all the markings made. That first marking she tells me to make, I'm going to place it directly on that line, like I said, matching up the bottom of the upside down T with the bottom edge of my fold over elastic. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to stitch directly on that line that I drew first. I'm going to use a contrasting thread so you can see this a little bit better. You would probably want to use a matching thread so that yours won't be as noticeable as mine, but I'm okay with it for mine for the purpose of this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stitching. I'm definitely going to go back and forth and make sure I securely lock in those stitches. That is the first loop made. Well, let me say, that is the first line sewed. Then I take that second line I drew, I'm going to fold it over and line it up, the bottom edge with the bottom of that T, and that top, the straight part of the T with the line that I made. So let's look at that a little bit clearly. You probably can't see my line, but here's my line and here's my T. I'm just going to slide it down there so that it's even and uniform. Now I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and sew directly on the line I made, the line I drew. So you can see this is the first large loop I have made. I'm going to continue to repeat this for both lining pieces. So my next line that I drew, it gets slid over so that the bottom of my fold over elastic is right with that bottom of the T, and my line I drew is with the line of the T. Take it over, stitch directly on that line again, back stitching, top and bottom. You're going to continue to repeat this process for all the lines you drew and all the T's you made on the large and the small of the lining. I'm not going to go through and show you all these, so I'll speed this part up and then we'll look at it when we're done at the end. Okay, now I have the small and the large loops made. I went ahead and cut, or I thought I cut all the strings. Here's another thread. So cut all your threads. You will have a lot of tiny little threads there, so snip all those off. Don't trim your overhang just yet. Let's go ahead and baste the linings onto the exteriors, and then we'll trim the overhang then. It'll just make it a little bit easier to make sure we don't cut it too short. Make sure you orientate your exterior if you need to so that this is the right way where the bottom was. We're going to place the exterior and the lining wrong sides together. I'm just going to throw a couple clips in here so that we can baste all the way around the sides, the complete perimeter, with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance securing these two pieces. Now we have the linings attached to our exteriors. Make sure you trim up any overhang you have. Even with your vinyl, sometimes you'll get a little bit of overhang, so trim everything up, and then we will go ahead and attach these panels to our gussets. So at this point, we have our gusset with the quarter marks and a zipper pull attached. We have our exteriors and linings attached, and we have the binding left. So now it's time to compile all these pieces together. And with your zipper pull, you can decide which way you want to go. I want mine to close to the left. So if you look at it this way, and it's closing to the left, choose, if yours is different, which way you want, or which panel you want to be on the front. So I want this one to be on the front, so I'm going to attach it to this side here for my gusset. So I'll take my top marking and match it up to the top here, matching up my bottom mark, putting a clip in there, and then I'll do my side marks, and then I will just go the rest of the way around, easing the corners in. I saved the curves for last just so I can ease them in easily and make sure if there's any like bunching or bulk, I can just spread it out. Okay, at this point I have the gusset clipped onto the panel. We're looking at the lining side. We can look in here and see that I have my exterior and my zipper closing the way I want it, so we're good. Now we are going to be sewing around some curves. You have a couple options here. You can hand base if you're nervous with the curves. You can do staples. Some people do that. I choose to use glue. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on each of the curves. You also could use hemostats. You could clip the hemostat right here and use it to hold that curve in place just to make it easier. You don't need any of that stuff. It's just if you want that as a personal preference if you're a little nervous. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little bit of glue and let it dry, and then I sew it with the panel against the bed of my machine. This is the way I found it easiest to sew. Before I start sewing this, I'm going to let my glue dry, and I also am just going to baste around this time. I'm not going to be going the full seam allowance. I will do that when I attach the binding, then I will sew that full seam allowance. Okay, so I have my basting stitch done. I'm going to trim up the little bit of shifting I had there on the corners. Not a lot, as you can see, just a little bit. I just want to go ahead and get that out of the way so when I attach my binding, it's not creating any problems. So for my binding, I just cut long strips. Like I said, I think it's about 1.75. Yeah, it is. So I just cut strips. I do not cut it on the bias, even though this is a curve. I usually don't have any trouble that way. So what I like to do, and this might seem a little odd, is I like to sew it still with my panel on the bed, but with the binding underneath. So I will sew it like this. So I really won't be able to see it too much. I'll just be able to watch the edge of it. But we need to sew it right sides together so that when we flip it up, it's the right way. I've did it wrong lots of times. So do not put it wrong sides against the right side. Right sides together. And the way I start it is I just fold down the raw edge a little bit, and then I just start in the middle of a straight spot. I don't want to start it on a curve. Of course, that'd be a little difficult. I do not clip that all the way around. I just clip at that one spot, and then I just sew with the full seam allowance when I attach the binding. And I just watch to make sure that those raw edges are lining up when I go around. When you go around the curve, don't pull it tight. Give it some room there so that you can flip up when you're done. And then just make sure you go slow, one stitch, and then rotate, one stitch and rotate. So we're getting close to where we started our bonding, so I'm going to go ahead and go just a little bit past that and then cut this piece off. And so I will just fold the binding wrong sides together to have a finished edge on that, and then just continue sewing over it and back stitch well. So now that I have the binding sewn, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip the binding. I'm going to tuck that raw edge under and then fold it over so that it covers the existing stitches I just made. I'm going to put a clip in here, and then I'm going to go and clip all the way around and do this all around the perimeter of the bag. So I have the binding clipped around, and you can see everything looks great. I'm going to sew the binding from this side. So this time I'm going to have it laying like this because this is going to be the side I want to watch this time. So it'll be a little tricky to have that extra bulk laying down, but it'll be fine to maneuver. So whenever I'm going around this way, I'll have it flat, but then whenever I come around the curves, I'll actually kind of stand the bag up and rotate it that way. So let me go ahead and sew this on. I'm going to use the seam allowance that is given in the pattern to sew on my binding. Let me stop and tell you something real quick. Last bag I made like this when I was making a tester, my little loops here tried to get caught in my automatic cutter. Not automatic, but my cutter here on the side. So be careful that you don't get yours in there and cut and rip that. So just be aware and kind of hold it out of the way while you're doing it. Or you could even like put a piece of tape or something over there. It's just they try to catch whenever you're sewing around. Okay, I attached my binding, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat all of this for the other side. So let's go ahead and look at the other side. Take this last panel we have, and this is the last step we have. That's how quick this comes together. Match up those quarter markings again. And I'm not going to show you this whole process again since you already saw it for this one. So what I will do is I'm just going to clip all around. I'm going to baste this, and then I will add my binding and sew it on with the full seam allowance once again. After I sew the binding on with that full seam allowance, I'm going to flip it and clip it in place, and then I'll attach it one more time. I'm going to just trim up that little edge there I see hanging out. But I will flip and clip it and then sew around again with that same seam allowance. And I will do that around the perimeter of the bag once more, and then I will come back and we will flip the bag inside out and see how it looks. So I finished sewing up the other side, and now it's time to turn the bag right sides out and see how everything looks. You'll need to press the seams out, so just push down there from the bottom. And then do it around the top and the curves. This bag doesn't need a lot of shaping, but if you find you need to, you can just put some clips in the top. Push out the other side the same way. Start with those bottom curves. And there it is. The bag looks perfect. I got a string I need to trim right there. But everything looks great. It's such a super cute pouch. And it really is versatile. If you don't want to use the little loops, you can leave them out and just have a cute little cosmetic bag, or a bag for things for your kids, or even like ink pens or pencils or anything like that. It's just a great pouch. It comes together really quick. Thank you so much for watching this video. I am going to put the link for the pattern in my description. I'm going to put also the link for this exterior vinyl and also the water resistant canvas that I used on the inside. So all that will be in my description. And thank you so much for sewing with me, and I hope you guys have a great day.